Great. So our first panel discussion is on the topic of follow-up and clinical outcomes after treatment. And I'm very happy to have three distinguished experts here on stage, which most of you might know, and who can bring their international perspectives and also perspectives from different backgrounds here to the table. So I'd like to start with María Gloria Álvarez Caballero. She is a biomedical engineer and quality manager of the Simum 3D platform at the Technological Training Center at SerGaS, the Galician Health Services. Welcome. We have Dr. Francesco Moscato. He's associate professor and also a diploma engineer at the Medical University of Vienna. Francesco, welcome.
Good morning.
And we have Dr. Neha Sharma. She's CMF surgeon at the University Hospital Basel and the deputy head for Print Lab. So welcome to the three of you, and we have this overarching question for this panel discussion. When does a treatment come to an end, and why is it important to talk about that topic? And this I would like to ask you first of all for an introductory statement of yours. So Maria, would you like to start? When does a treatment come to an end from your point of view? When should it come to an end? What are the issues to discuss here?
Okay, so I think there would be like two focuses. On one hand, it would be like the clinical follow-up, which is led by the all healthcare professionals, and like how did the preoperative or how did the intraoperative guidance work according to the outcome of the patient, the prognostics, etc. And on the other hand, it would be like the technical focus of the medical device follow-up. So that's on us. I mean, on us as a point of care, like to lead that follow-up, because healthcare professionals usually won't do it because of their own load of work. So at least from our experience, what we do is we have integrated within the IT system of the hospital like a survey system. So it activates within 72 hours after the surgery in the operating room. And it covers different aspects regarding alternative uses, IES instructions for use, if they were helpful or not, for example, also with the labeling, potential risks, actual risks, not only for the patient, also for the healthcare user. Several aspects included in the MDR. And what we do is lead like that, sharing information and information collection from the clinician, because those are aspects, for example, if everything's okay, they don't consider they need to report it as. But if something seems okay, but with that patient, it maybe contribute like to help future patients. Okay. So that's why we think it's important to apply the follow-up.
Already very good example, maybe best practice. Let's see, we'll discuss. Francesco, what are the issues from your point?
Let me start saying that I was sort of challenged by this question because being active in research and development, I always see what comes first and not when the treatment comes to an end, so to say. Obviously, as Maria was saying, the treatment comes to an end never if you intend to use a device that is, for example, like an implant. It comes to an end if your device is curative and stays not implanted, for example. But with this sort of rare case. So the focus is on follow-up, basically speaking, meaning, following up the outcome of if an implant, if we speak of an implant, of course, this could be long life follow-up. So when it comes to an end, never, unless you cure your patient, so to say. And it's extremely important to establish a system to keep track about the treatment and the device effectiveness and outcome, clinical outcome.
Good, thank you. So keeping track, I think this is what we'll discuss over the next minutes. And Neha, what is your perspective on that overarching question?
It's actually a double-edged sword in this question, because from a patient perspective, the treatment should come to an end as soon as possible. And then being as a surgeon or in general as a community, the treatment should not come to an end, because that's how we learn with the follow-up. So even if it's like Francesco said, it's an implant, yes, the patient is fine, doing fine, but the follow-ups are important for us. Even if something is not being reported, it helps the community and as a surgeon to learn what went well and what went wrong. So for a patient, it should definitely come to an end, but from a surgeon perspective, it's a long process, and it should not come to an end.
Okay, thank you very much. We are very much interested in your perspectives, dear participants here as well, and like to actively interact with you and include you into the discussion. And therefore would like to, first of all, come to know who is in the room with regards to professional backgrounds. And therefore, let's start a poll. So please all take out your mobile phones if you. So what professional background do you have? This will create a word cloud, so please type in your job function, basically your job title, more or less one word, and then we will see a little bit and get an orientation of who is in the room. And afterwards we will have several other questions, and of course throughout the whole discussion you are invited to pose your own questions on the conference app and vote for the questions that you like and which you would like to see and which you would like to be asked here on stage. So we have a number of participants typing now, and we see that there are a lot of engineers in the room here, and from different backgrounds. From your perspective and from your experience in your organizations, who is actually at the moment most interested in the follow-up of treatments, basically? Francesco.
Well, obviously for the follow-up, these are clinicians that lead the role because they have the contact with the patient. However, I feel myself also within this engineering context. At the Medical University of Vienna, the infrastructure which is devoted to medical additive manufacturing is run primarily by engineers, mostly biomedical, mechanical engineers, and we team up, of course, with clinicians, especially on the side of requests from the clinics, and then we involve clinicians as much as possible in any type of design questions, feedback, and for the follow-up, we rely on clinicians and on their feedback about the outcomes of the treatment. In any case, as we are mostly dealing with pre- and intraoperative aids, the treatment comes pretty soon to an end, so to say, if you like. Implants are sort of, we have experience, but I would rather say still at a very early stage in our institution, therefore we do not have long-term follow-up.
Yeah, from your experience in the hospital, is this kind of the typical role distribution of people interested in our topic?
I mean, in Basel, the scenario is typically different than this, because it's a lab which is run by surgeons. So the drive is from the surgical side, and then we collaborate or work together with engineering departments. So it's a combination, I would say.
So should surgeons also in other hospitals be more interested from
Definitely,
your perspective?
If you want to bring point-of-care manufacturing, surgeons need to be involved in this.
Maria, do you have a view?
Yeah, well, our functioning is more similar to what Francesco just explained. And I would say, of course, surgeons are really committed with their patients. But I think sometimes, I mean, regarding the medical device, if there's a real risk, like an implant or a surgical guide, they are more involved because they feel like it has had like an active role within the treatment. But for examples with preoperative planning, this is, at least from my experience, it's personal theory, but this is not the case. Because like, it would be like the digital evolution of what they did to further comprehend the anatomy, which was drawing the anatomy. So they still draw anatomy. And when with the digital anatomical models, or for example for virtual reality also, that's like a drawing, like same information, different presentation, but it's not, they don't consider it like a medical device, like a tool, but more like a trigger for the capabilities. So that's why they feel, as they feel it like a trigger, they don't feel like it has had an active role in the surgery, and that's why they don't think a follow-up is needed, because it hasn't been in contact with the patient and stuff.
So that's one of the
So that would be the difference.
Yeah? Would you?
Yeah, well, I would sort of mirror what Maria was saying. In fact, we are also trying to educate clinicians that are not sensible to these regulatory questions, to make them understand that preoperative planning can be, a medical device if you use a model on which you change your therapy or access or select specific tools. I really like the Basel perspective, and in fact, I have a question for you, if I may.
Sure, go ahead.
Because this is the question that I also ask our surgeons, of course, in our institution. Committing yourself to this technology means that you need to dedicate time to that, which you don't use for other, I would say, more classical surgical aspects. So how would you convince, let's say, surgeons that are pretty much into their everyday business to dedicate part of their time, and I know that there is really lack of time, especially because of new working hours regulations in Europe, saying, you don't stay in the OR, but you rather stay with me and plan and print and test?
If I were to say in one word, it's passion, and there is something called overworking hours.
Well, but I know that.
I mean, that's how we started in Basel, because we were passionate about using this technology into our day-to-day clinical workflow. We saw the benefits that we could achieve with this technology. So yes, our day-to-day work is clinical, we deal with that, but then there are evenings and then there are early mornings. And that's how we train ourselves. So I'm an example. I'm trained as a CMF surgeon, but I also have a PhD in biomedical engineering, in which I learned these skills and about additive manufacturing, printing, designing. And in our group, we have a couple of PhD students, which are a combination, who are medical doctors who are enrolled into this technology biomedical engineering program. And on the other hand, we have biomedical engineers as well, with whom we provide the knowledge of the surgical expertise, or what are the things that you need to consider. So it's not just one focus approach, like it's a surgeon-driven, no, or neither it's a bioengineering focus approach. It's a combination of both in Basel.
Okay, thank you. So maybe we get into some more detail, also with regard to what kind of devices we are talking about, also with data collection then and data sharing. And maybe we have another poll before we come to the questions also from the audience. And this is a question on what kind of 3D printed medical devices you are involved with. So is it implants? Is it surgical guides? Is it anatomic models? Is it maybe others, also not only medical devices? Could you please answer this question again? And from your experience, in your point of view, what would you say? In which area is it most important to collect data, to share data? For which kind of devices? Are there any experiences? Who I would like? Francesco is looking.
Well, obviously, depending on, it's everything interwoven with the question of reimbursement somehow as well, because somebody has to fund these type of activities, both in terms of real working hour, not only evenings, because you need sort of people working actively on it, but also on materials and devices and technologies. And collecting data and evidence is most important if you want to demonstrate the usefulness of your new therapy, so to say. Therefore, I would imagine that anything which is related or close to the patient treatment, starting with the most invasive implants, going into surgical guides or intraoperative aspects, if we want to really establish this, we need to collect data about the effectiveness and the usefulness of these therapies. I do see anatomical models are rather an easy entry point because they do not cost much. You can have, printing technologies and also, a level of skill that is not very sophisticated to produce it. So it's rather easier to fund this on conventional budget, but definitely, it's interesting to collect data also there. About others, I would really like to know from the audience what are the others projects they intend.
Yeah, maybe we learn from some of the questions there. Maria, any reaction?
I totally agree with you, Francesco. We need to generate evidence for reimbursement and to expand 3D printing point of care. And I would add, obviously, as it has been said before, depending on the class of device, for example, implants would need a longer follow-up, of course, and a wider information collection because of the risks it could imply to the patient. But it would be a good entry point, like to start, for example, with anatomic models and develop a standardized procedures, and then getting into more complex applications and more wider collections.
Yeah. Any view on particular challenges maybe, or particular benefits from data collection and sharing on the different types of medical devices?
I see three important factors for data collection here. One is definitely reimbursements. We need it to get the insurances to pay for this. Second is to increase the knowledge about the safety or the applicability of this technology into the general community. So that could be through publications. Third is through patient-reported outcomes, which is through clinical registries. And this is very important because as we are developing new technologies, this is something currently missing in our current literature. So I see three sectors which needs to be filled up.
Yeah, I especially, like the aspect of registry, because it's something that might be of an easier reach than more complex type of data gathering. Everybody of us in clinical institutions runs some sort of institutional registries, I suppose, but I think there's really the need for a European consensus about registries. And if I may, I would like to point out the activities that we are trying to push forward within the European Special Interest Group for 3D printing in hospitals. This is a group of institutions at additive manufacturing facilities at the point of care, and we are trying out to coordinate these efforts to build registries as it is done in the North American domain by the RSNA, the Radiological Society of North America Special Interest Group on 3D printing. I think this is sort of an easy way to start to do a multi-institutional registry about certain indications and certain applications of additive manufacturing.
Now I have a question for you.
Very good.
It's a very good initiative about registries within the EU, but I was wondering, how do you control the data regulations? Because in Switzerland there are certain regulations and which might differ in Germany, in Austria, and France. So how do you decide to have consolidated data which is common to all and yet also useful because each country will have their own restrictions regarding data sharing?
I think this is somehow an easy way to go following this GDPR regulation, because now currently in our institution, whenever we have a multi-center study, we do not have to prepare the clinical study protocol, but also we have to go to the GDPR clearing house that tells us how the data should be in order to be able for us to share this among institutions. And I suppose that this procedure is not only an Austrian peculiarity, but this is established also elsewhere. So somehow rules, when we see new laws coming up, we are always very afraid, but I think that this GDPR and the fact that it forced institutions to think clearly about the problem that you mentioned, that is a very important one, might be of help there.
Mm-hmm. Maria, Francesco raised the topic of the EU 3D Special Interest Group. You're also part of that and working that. What are your experiences with that group so far?
Well, I'm a pretty recent member comparing to Francesco, but I think it's a really special proposal, like to try to unify 3D printing standards and to promote multi-center studies to create evidence, which is, evidence, but longitudinal evidence with big ends, and that's really important to develop in Europe because of to expand, to implement new 3D units, to have institutional support, to have institutional reimbursement, and also like to implement, as Neha said, not only healthcare professionals, but also engineers need to be trained specifically for developing this kind of medical devices, for example, and all the quality management system that involves. So it's also a really interesting way to try to homogenize that training within all the professional profiles.
Mm-hmm.
And also networking. Mm-hmm. Because networking is the base for developing all this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Just maybe wanted to add, like within the group, we have submitted to become like a cost action. So it's more like a European scientific procure status, and that could also help what you were asking about, data collection and data storing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, good, thank you. Let's start with some of the questions from the audience. So the overarching and first question, when does a treatment come to an end, is picked up here in this first question. Is a treatment ever finalized with procedures that have not been on the market and established for as long as old procedures? Can make sense. Like to go on here.
Old procedures. There's one example that I can say is regarding this cement that we commonly use in CMF and also in orthopedics, in knee surgeries.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a PMMA or acrylic cement. We just mold it and you bump it or patch it up into the anatomical defect. So that has been like an old procedure, which has been there since more than 30-40 years, still being used even in Europe and US. And the product, or it's not being there in the market. But the results are still, because we don't have better solutions for that, so that's the only solution which is available.
Mm-hmm.
So it's still something that is currently used in the clinics.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This is an excellent actual example in orthopedic and trauma surgery. There are many of those, from an engineering perspective, uncrafted aspects, and nobody truly thinks of this PMMA implant as a medical device to a certain extent. Mm-hmm. Nevertheless, I think there's it's never finalized. You follow up those patients just as you would follow up a patient with an implant, I guess. So that's why I don't think that the treatment can be thought about ever finalized for such type of an implant.
And in Asia, these PMMA cements are also used as only implants.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
okay,
yeah.
Good, thank you. Who pays for the follow-up treatment and for how long? Does quality suffer from cost pressure?
Oh, this is an excellent question. Because I see a major challenge for medical additive manufacturing of the point of care in terms of costs. And this follow-up cost is, of course, a very important one. When you have a traditional medical device implant, there's usually a company that sells the implant. This is runs studies and to establish, let's say, the certification of the implant, runs post-market studies, and to a certain extent pays for this follow-up, if you like, and it pays out of the earnings they do by selling the implants. If we have an implant which is produced into a hospital, or if it's produced by a hospital, then it should be the hospital that sort of takes care about covering up those costs. And there is a, this is where things are interwoven. Ideally, we would have the reimbursement of those devices for the implant themselves by insurance company, and eventually, this follow-up will have to be taken up by either the government that empowers hospitals with possibilities of manufacturing, if we speak about governmental hospitals, or private hospitals, and therefore these may be the payers. But I do think that quality suffers from cost pressure to a certain extent, yes, because the more resources you have, the better, or the more staff you have, which is around the question of quality. So I think, and because of these new rules, it means that you start not doing things because we don't want to do things in a poorer quality than required. So it's not quality that suffers from cost pressure, but the possibility to deliver a treatment suffers from the cost pressure.
Do you have experience with cost effectiveness of now post-treatment activities?
We are working on, because whenever you talk to hospital managements, they really want to know, okay, what do we get in, what is going out? And here definitely we need to come up with our own solutions, or like a budgeting, what are the resources in-house and how much an implant or anatomical model would cost. But these are direct numbers. What the hospitals don't realize, or the administration doesn't realize, because we currently save on the operating time. And in Switzerland, 1 minute is around 120 francs. So we did a study regarding orbital implants, which were just pre-bent on an anatomical model. And with that, we could save around 90 minutes of a surgical time. So 90 into 120, that's around 3,000 to 4,000 francs per surgery. That is beneficial for the hospital. But these indirect strategies we need to implement, and we need to make the hospital administration as well aware of these. If we directly compare the fabrication of an implant and from the external, it's not so much. But the indirect benefits are huge. The length of the stay in the hospital decreases, operating time decreases. So this is something very important.
Yeah, and maybe studies for post-treatment may show these results, and therefore should be also fostered. Let's come to the next question. How do you ensure key developments and knowledge is shared democratically? Scientists tend to be protective and maybe publish their results for them. And is democratization happening? It's key for success of 3DP tech. So you talked about your special interest group. Do you have any particular ideas for answering that question from him?
I can say that the group is mainly focusing on 4 key activities, and one of it is knowledge sharing that occurs in 2 different ways. One, it's a classical way of producing consensus, scientific literature, multi-center studies, and thereby sharing the knowledge about the effectiveness. The other one is democratization in terms of, as Maria was saying, creating this basic knowledge about education. So what is the level of education for a clinician or for an engineer? This is most appropriate in order to be able to deliver 3D printing technology. And I think through the role of, let's say, international non-profit scientific societies or communities like this, you can ensure a democratic knowledge of sharing. Scientists, I don't think that they tend to be protective. Once you have an IP that is filed, then you want to distribute it as much as possible. Of course, they tend to be protective on inventions, but it's not all about inventions, I think. It's about the processes, it's about of sharing, these tips and tricks, how to start, what is the best technology for which application, and I guess the special interest group or similar type of international non-profit like activities will really bring forward this process of democracy.
Okay, we are more or less already at the end. Maria?
Yeah, I would say I do think scientists tend to be a little bit protective when talking about publishing. So this is why I think I have previous experience with patient safety and adverse events notification. And when you have a common registry like the European ones we're working on, and you can send like kind of anonymous information, it's people are more willing to share the real data because they feel like they like they are not being discovered or pointed or something. So I think having a shared registry accessible for everyone but in a protected way would help to ensure this sharing information.
Okay. Maybe taking that as the last words. Thank you very much to the three of you here in panel. Thank you for asking questions and participating. And now there is time for collaborating, starting, sharing also information at the networking activities and during the coffee break we have now. And then we see each other here again at 10 to 11. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
See you then.